You need to know the community. You need to, in the communities that have their zoning in place, that have their comprehensive plans in place, it's that much more kind of straightforward that you're executing their vision, not necessarily your vision.
Yeah.
So that's a key awareness that you need to have. And also, often you need to do a lot of kind of listening. You need to be patient. And we find that the more amenities and the more community benefits you can provide, obviously, I don't want to say obviously, but the more straightforward an approval can be.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's also good for the success of the project. You know, if you're adding some amenities within a development project, it's not only good for the renters or buyers that you need to have that project be successful, but it's also good for the community. So we found that at the Downs. We've been finding that in Freeport and other projects that we've worked on.
That's great. Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot, of Pouliot Real Estate. Each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here. And today I'm thrilled to have joining us Dan Bacon. Dan is the development director for M&R Development, which is a multidisciplinary real estate development firm specializing in residential, mixed use, and commercial projects in Southern Maine. Dan leads planning, design, and permitting for all projects, including the Downs, which is a 575-acre planned community in Scarborough that is redefining placemaking and scalable community development in Maine. With a career spanning both the public and private sectors, Dan brings a collaborative, solutions-oriented approach to building places where people want to live, work, and visit. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Matt, great to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
We'll get into some of your background and different, boards or associations and whatnot that you're involved with as we talk today. But I really wanted to start with your public planning to private development kind of transition, if you will. Not the moment of that transition, but you spent a lot of time on the municipal side, which we've talked about a lot on this podcast, in planning departments before moving into the private development side. How did working on that public side really shape the way you approach development today?
Yeah, sure. So before working for M&R Holdings, as well as I was actually a consultant for a few years between public and private, but prior to that, I started as an assistant planner on Cape Cod, and in a fast-paced community, a lot of growth and development. And I was given a lot of ability to work on new zoning, work with developers, work with the community on smart growth. So I learned a lot about smart growth in particular, how zoning needs to be structured for development projects to be successful, and then moved on to the town of Scarborough and became the planning director there and served as planning director for about 12 years. And in that role, I've interacted with developers on a daily basis, and I actually got the kind of the itch to want to be on the private side as kind of my time there came towards an end, because I saw that you can write zoning, and it's important to write good zoning to enable smart growth and responsible development. There's only so much you can do as a planner. Often projects would come in and plans would already be, as they should, be figured out and laid out. And as a planner, you're always asking, oh, could you put the building over here, or could you do it a little bit differently? But that's not really your role as the regulator. And I became increasingly interested to be on the front lines, to be in the more formative stages of doing development. So I decided to pivot to consulting, because that was at least closer to being a developer and helping execute smart growth development projects. And then after a few years of doing that and getting immersed in the Downs, I pivoted to working directly for M&R Holdings, who were executing the project.
And I'm sure it's great now to be on the side of being able to execute the project. I know I'm working on a project right now, and Grohl Palmer is my engineer. Did
great.
you work there for a while? Or?
I did, yeah.
Great firm. And, we got through the first pricing exercise, and they're like, this will be, 1.8 million to do these 24 pads. And it's like, okay, that's not great. Obviously we're not abandoning completely, but you've been there, right? You just, pivot. And the engineer, he's a wonderful guy. He's like, yeah, it's always a bummer when we know that the work that we've done, like, isn't going to get built.
Right.
There's only so much that you can do from that side of the table, the planning, the engineering, everything. Eventually, there has to be an execution, and it generally just comes down to a math equation,
For sure.
But now you're able to actually affect this change on the private side because you're also involved in the discussions with the people and saying, hey, maybe your building can go here instead of there because it's your project.
Right.
Yeah,
and we
it's
also
cool.
can do internal cost estimating, and we can do internal layouts to kind of, before we get to Goral Palmer, kind of test the pro forma and test our program to see if it's something we should go forward with a design and permitting.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. For every development project that happens, there's probably 4 that have been designed, permitted, or at least explored that aren't pursued because the numbers don't work, or what you thought was meeting the market doesn't meet the market from an end user standpoint or from a design standpoint.
Yeah. Well, it's great you're able to bring that formative experience of working on the municipal side, which oftentimes the development community could be at odds with if they don't have the right understanding of what the community needs and what they're looking for, and then like how to deliver on that.
Yeah. I also got a lot of practice presenting to planning boards.
Yeah.
In the case of being on the public side, it was presenting a zone change or explaining why a development application is the way it is. So that gave me a great sense for how to successfully go through entitlements, how to pitch a project. And working on the public side, you understand what communities are looking for, pitch points, and really how to navigate, the entitlement process.
Yeah, great. With as it relates to the Downs, you were really integral in essentially getting the field ready, right?
Yeah.
Like going about the development there with the background of having been involved in the planning department for over a decade, right? You were able to kind of get the conditions, I would imagine, set up in a way in which you could then come around as a developer on the private side and know the field that you're working in.
Right.
Whereas a lot of developers, I think, are coming into a community because they're lured in by an economic development director or some enterprising individual who's got a project to do there locally, and they're not as familiar with that local landscape.
Yeah, for sure.
So that must give you a really great vantage point to look at and think about, hey, when I was working on planning, now I'm actually in the role of being a steward of making that happen, which to me is, we can have conversations all the time about planning, right?
Right.
But if we don't have the ability to really actualize what those plans show, then they're kind of worthless.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as planning director, for Scarborough in particular on the Downs project, working with the community, we laid the groundwork for the comprehensive plan, but also the zoning to execute the project that now on the development side, I'm helping the partners execute for M&R.
Yeah.
So I understood the community's desires for that site. Scarborough Downs is in the geographic center of Scarborough.
Yeah.
It's the perfect place for smart growth, a perfect place for denser housing, for creating a new town center, which Scarborough, as a more originally rural suburban community, didn't have.
Because Scarborough is more like, and we could talk probably at length about any municipality, but I'm always looking at things that apply broader than just Maine, as we're, with this podcast, having a larger audience. There really is kind of this tale of two Maines, but there's kind of a tale of two United States too, and where we have very rural areas, and then the more urban, dense centers. And Scarborough was largely farmland, right? That over time became more of a bedroom community.
It was farmland and then gravel pits and motels. That was kind of the early auto age, you know, the growth of after World War II. having Route 1, like a lot of up and down the East Coast, Route 1 between hamlets and between cities really became kind of the suburban sprawl corridor. And Scarborough was an example of that. So it had gravel pits and motels along Route 1, and it had little hamlets, Higgins Beach and Pine Point and Proud Snack. So it was actually a community of villages with no town center. And a lot of growth, a lot of residential growth. But during the 60s through 90s, that residential growth wasn't concentrated. It was spread out. So there was a real desire by the community to have a hub, to have a modern, true town center. And Scarborough Downs was a site that was in the geographic center. So it had that potential and that opportunity to be that center whenever the harness racing track really was kind of tailing off, whenever it was going to kind of transition to a new use. Because that use, is really a vestige of the past.
Do you think it took longer to go down the road that is now what Scarborough Downs has become, or the Downs has become, because there was a lot of desire to have a casino there or something of that nature, and that it kind of delayed things in getting going more in this direction?
It certainly did. Yeah, there was anywhere from 12 to 16 different contracts on that land. It was for sale for a number of years, and the majority of those contracts were for a casino.
Yeah.
And there was going to be some development involved associated with the casino, but the casino concept was really the driver of those deals. And 3 or 4 times proposals were made to the legislature at the state level and or the town to enable a casino, and it was always rejected, at a state or local level. So the folks I worked for were one of the few groups that kind of came in and said, hey, we want to do a development play here, not a casino. And the zoning had been put into place to enable that to happen, to enable a mixed-use project that could deliver that town center that Scarborough never had.
For a long time, there was a groundwork laid in Scarborough to have denser urban residential around a town center. And then there was a number of years that were lost in that development happening because a casino was being proposed and lots of proposals coming forward for people to just do a casino on that site. And it seems like at the local level, people at least stood up at some point and said, we don't want the casino here, we want to have what you're doing now, which is housing, right?
So in 2013, the zoning was changed to enable a mixed-use community. And then it was 2017 when the M&R partners, so Michoud and Risbera team, really identified the Downs as a real estate play and put it under contract in the fall of 27 and had a very short due diligence period and closed early January of 2018.
Yeah, okay. So this project proposes like 2,000 units of housing, right?
It does.
And 1,000 jobs on a 570-acre parcel of land in Southern Maine. That is something that I wonder if it's able to be done elsewhere, or if it's really kind of more so only possible in Cumberland and York counties within Maine, or in certain market demographics.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think in the near term, it's really more of a York, Cumberland County opportunity. There's not actually a lot of parcels of this size, frankly, that are contiguous, that are close to infrastructure, that are in growing parts of the state. So that's why I would agree with you on Southern Maine being a location that a few more could happen. You need the right ingredients. You need the right zoning. You need the right site. You need the right team that wants to take on a project of this scale. And you need the right timing. And so I don't see it as being something we're going to see a lot of in Southern Maine. What we do think can be gleaned from the Downs is components of it being replicated. We're doing some pretty unique neighborhoods that are mixed housing neighborhoods. So it's not just single-family neighborhoods here and a multifamily apartment complex there. They're integrated with the right zoning. That can be deployed in most communities and be super successful. The Innovation District is our economic development area, the project where Costco is, where IDEX is. We came up with an approach where we pre-permitted the entire area. We laid it out in a way that there were 55 one-acre lots, and end users could come along based on their building size needs. They could acquire one lot. They could acquire, in the case of IDEX, 22. And it was laid out in a way to be very modular in that manner, so that you didn't have to get the perfect lot size. You just needed the common denominator that could be added onto. So something like that is definitely could be replicated in other parts of Southern Maine. And some of the mixed-use components of the project could as well. So we see kind of more of that potential, where there's lessons learned from the project that can be deployed in like smaller scale projects and be quite successful.
Would you agree that that's probably one of the largest pressures on development in Maine right now, is the lack of the ability at the local level to support other approaches to development? You know, like if somebody has, let's say, a village cottage court design, and they're like, well, you know, the code book says that I can only have 10 homes there, but this design would allow for 15 on the same size lot, and we're not going to impact the environment any negatively. People's quality of life won't go down. It will be the same or better. But the book says I can't do that. And then they don't have like the capacity locally to make changes to that in a timely fashion.
I think that's probably the biggest headwind around housing, is having the right zoning to enable smart growth and smart housing development, to enable compact development like you're describing, to enable single-family homes next to townhouses, next to apartment buildings. And we're hopeful that with projects like the Downs, some other projects show that they're super successful, that they are good for communities in terms of providing attainable housing, but also fiscally, you know, to serve them in an efficient way, and that they're desirable and livable.
Yeah. So we've started off talking a lot about the Downs because of your background in Scarborough, but M&R Holdings is doing much more than one project in Southern Maine, which is, by the way, one of the largest projects underway in the state in and of itself. But you've got other things going on too. So for listeners that are not familiar with the company, how would you describe M&R Holdings' approach to development and the kind of projects that you're most focused on?
Yeah, so M&R Development is owned by the Michaud and the Risbera families. Okay. And it's really a family of companies that work together. M&R Development is myself. We have a great kind of pre-construction team with some other individuals. We do the planning, the design, the permitting for the Downs. All the sites that are kind of being executed in the Downs. We're also working on a few other projects we can probably talk about later in the podcast. But we also have a design arm, so we can do some engineering, some architecture in-house. Okay. We have an affiliate construction company, so Risbera Construction does a lot of executes a lot of the construction for the projects that we perform. Not all of them, but many. We also have a property management arm. So Maine Properties is owned by M&R Development. It's a large Greater Portland property management group that manage apartments, condominiums, some of which are ours, some of which are others, as well as does remodeling and smaller construction projects.
So really fully vertically integrated, right, from entitlements through management.
Yeah, we are. So we can take a project from the idea phase all the way to occupancy and manage the property after occupancy.
That's quite rare.
It is. And I don't know if there's many others in the state. And it enables us to obviously perform our own projects successfully, but also work with end users and perform others. So we do, in the Innovation District in particular, a fair amount of build-to-suit commercial space where an end user will come along, need a building, want to lease it versus own, and we can kind of take it all the way through the process for them rather than outsourcing any of the various disciplines.
Yeah, that's a great competitive advantage because oftentimes there are these bottlenecks that are created by other people who are involved in the process, whether it's the GC for the development or the person who's responsible for getting the tenants into the buildings when it's completed. You know, there can be different issues, and having this approach must be in part what allows you to take on some of these more ambitious, larger projects because you're able to look at different parts of the segments in terms of implementation and execution and be like, we can do that in-house. We know that we're going to be able to hit these dates.
Exactly.
Just kind of keep things
It
on
really
track.
helps us streamline the process and coordinate the process internally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just curious if you think there's room for or need for more of that type of an approach to solving this development dilemma that we have in the state. Because in other parts of the country, you mentioned earlier, I can't remember if this was before we were recording or not, but for if it was, that in parts of like North Carolina, Texas, Arizona, for instance, you can just do a planned unit development project pretty easily because you know the demand's going to be there to kind of take the spots as they come, versus in Maine, the timeline is a lot longer. And what I'm wondering is, in those parts of the country, there are people whose job it is just to get land ready for contractors to come and maybe take 50 lots and build spec homes on them. You're the one that's getting your own land ready to build your own homes. I mean, is there a need to bring in other builders into those situations to meet the demand, or is it the opposite, that you're better positioned to make this work economically because you're doing it all in-house, and there needs to be more of a move toward that? Because, as we just said, your approach to doing things at M&R is totally different than what's normal. You're more vertically integrated. And it seems to me that in order for there to be success in the development front in Maine, there needs to be more vertically integrated companies. But that's just not the way we typically operate here.
Yeah, I think it certainly helps us from a timeline standpoint, from a understanding cost standpoint, from a coordination standpoint. I think some of the success outside of the state is demand. It's also permitting related. Other parts of the country are less parochial in terms of permitting. And also do more streamlined reviews. And so that plays a role. But in terms of success of the Downs and our team, we've intentionally kind of taken big bites with phases so that we can go to DEP once for a couple of years and get a large area approved and enable a scaled project. So enable us to build 203 units under that one permit over the course of a couple of years. And that's also with our team and our construction team. If we're doing housing types that we've done a few times, then we can do them at scale and at pace to kind of hit the market, which I think is what's happening in those other parts of the country.
Yeah, that makes sense. So looking back on some of the past projects that you've had over the years, what are some important lessons that you've taken away, whether they're about zoning, community engagement, financing, or timing, that continue to inform your work today?
Sure. I mean, zoning and the site location and infrastructure are paramount. If you don't have the right zoning in place, it's a lot more challenging to go to the community and try to get a contract zone or get a zone change specific to a project versus the zoning being already in place and ready to be utilized, because the community has already had those conversations. The community's already decided that that's the right zoning and the type of development that they're desiring in that location. So that's what we look for. The Downs is a great example. there's other great examples we can talk about.
So I assume the team would not have come to the table had that work not already been done on the zoning front for the Downs, right?
No,
Yeah.
the partners wouldn't have pursued the project.
Yeah.
The zoning provide a great canvas for doing mixed-use development and kind of meeting the market demand for Southern Maine. To try to get that done as a contract zone would have been a Herculean task.
Yeah, because it's a lot of money that would have had to be invested just to go and ask for permission to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Infrastructure is key as well.
Yeah.
So we look for sites that have the water, sewer, three-phase power all in place or in close proximity. So then you can really manage costs and understand before you proceed, what you're looking at in terms of infrastructure costs.
Yeah. I think that is one that is often overlooked, even when there is water and sewer at the road, how much it can cost just to get into a site. And sometimes people see there's water and sewer, but it's not sized the right way. There's not a lot of really good data, and this is kind of in the weeds, more on the development side of things, but there's not a lot of good data in Maine around where the water and sewer infrastructure even is. So when you start getting out of some of these designated growth areas or areas that are more dense where you're doing a lot of the work, it's really difficult to see where you can even take advantage of that. Whether it's a density bonus for building, more housing, which needs to be served by water and sewer, or, what other kind of restrictions go into being able to provide the sprinkler systems for these buildings. It's just, there's quite a bit to it. But I think, a lot of times people, what we were trying to do at the state level when I was on the housing committee was look at pre-approved building designs and types. And I know that you kind of have that in-house where you have certain designs around structures that you've done and you replicate because you have enough land to do them. But I'm wondering if there's a place for zones within Maine, and maybe this is leaning more on your planning background too, that would be like, yes, any of the plans that are in this book can be done in this zone. It's already approved. Just come get your building permit.
I think that's a great platform for towns and the state to pursue, is to do kind of the hard work up front. Towns do a lot of hard work up front on comprehensive planning, putting zoning in place, and then they add the step of having a planning board review projects that already comply with that hard work. So the more towns can go towards administrative reviews versus board reviews, I think that can really incentivize, especially small and mid-sized developers to proceed. Because when you have a planning board, you add additional discretion, you add often politics to a review on decisions that were really already made when the zoning was put into place. So I think there's an opportunity there, especially if you have a zone set up where do these types of homes, meet these setbacks, have this density, kind of eliminating that additional risk and kind of public process through planning board review, I think would be a great kind of tool for the toolbox for the state in some communities.
Well, this kind of dovetails well, I think, into what I wanted to talk with you next, which is that with every large project, there comes challenges. And I'm curious, what are some of the major hurdles with the Downs, for instance, whether they were zoning, public perception, or logistics, and how you worked through those? And I also want to talk a little bit more specifically as well about the fact that your company is doing something really novel in this state, which is creating our first real purpose-built downtown, at least in the modern era, I would say. I mean, maybe in the past, people built downtowns for a purpose that we're not familiar with. But I think as it relates today, you don't see downtowns being built just from the ground up, and you're doing that at the Downs. So maybe a little bit about what pushback there was, how that was overcome, and then why this purpose-built downtown center.
Yeah, so early on you mentioned we're building and have built and plan to build a lot of housing as part of the Downs. And that's been one of our kind of local challenges, is just the quantity of housing. from a political standpoint, or the optics of the community, because housing in most communities, local officials equate a lot of housing to a lot of school kids or stress on the municipality and the school system in particular. And in Scarborough, there's a growth cap, so there's only a certain number of homes that are allowed to be built town-wide every year. And that became a pretty big constraint for our project because we're attempting to build 2,000 units. And really, from the start of the project, projected to build 100 to 150 units a year, kind of to keep the project going, to pay for the infrastructure, to help solve the housing crisis in Maine. And that became a real kind of pinch point with the community is we only allow 125 per year town-wide, and you want 150, you know? So we spent a lot of time with the community around the types of units that we were building, doing study on, okay, we're only doing and intend to do 30%, 20% single family, which are the types of units that typically have school-age children.
And take up more land, too.
And take up more land. So we intentionally geared the project to kind of meet the market, but also meet the regulations and be acceptable to the community, to have more of the townhouses, apartments, condominiums, more attached housing that also would be the best financially for the community. But that took a lot of time to kind of negotiate. So that was a headwind that we ultimately worked through. But it took a while for us to get educated around the fiscal impacts and then educate the community. So what was an initial headwind, I think, is now sort of a lesson for the state, is it can help other communities kind of grapple with that challenge, is not all housing is equal in terms of its sort of drain or benefit to the community based on school-age kids and also just the lot size, the length of road that serves a various unit. I think the other thing that has been a pretty big headwind for us that we've worked through is offsite requirements, primarily traffic improvements. A big project, of hundreds of units, and then a Costco, and doing a town center with
Which,
a lot
by
of
the way,
retail.
thanks for bringing Costco, because my wife just absolutely loves it there.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah. I still haven't been, but she's been at least 57 times, I think.
Yeah, I think it's approaching 2 million visitors a year at this point.
Yeah,
that actually ties
great.
to the traffic because it's really outperforming what was expected.
Yeah.
And there's clearly pent-up demand for Costco in Maine.
Yeah.
And I think
Every Mainer loves a good deal.
It serves all of Maine. It's not just a Southern Maine destination.
Yeah.
And we're super thankful to have them too. It's an early anchor to kind of help activate additional retail in the project to really bolster that town center that we'll talk about, because you need a big draw.
Yeah, let's chat about that, because you can't just go build a town center in a field and be like, hey, we built it, now you come, right? It's more a function of what you're driving toward with the surrounding uses already, right?
For sure. Yeah, you need to have early anchors, early destinations that will then lead to the smaller coffee shop who wants to locate nearby, to the smaller apparel shop, to local retailers and tenants who can't just locate, inside a project without those big draws. So our strategy, and so far it's been quite successful, is to start with housing, get people living in the project, and at housing at scale. So we've built 700 units. So we have around 1,000 to 1,200 people living on site, after 5 or 6 years of the development underway. We added Costco, an employment area in the Innovation District, to get daily traffic in, but also get people going to the site on a daily basis for employment. And then negotiated some deals with some other key early end users in town center. So one of those is Market Basket. So a grocery anchor is critical for retail to locate in a town center. we knew we needed a grocery anchor to be right on the edge of the town center, and that's happening. They're now under construction. And then we attracted InterMed to the town center. So InterMed, a large medical group in Greater Portland, was looking for additional space. They needed a surgery center, additional medical office. So we started conversations with them a few years ago and wanted them to be a daily employment and medical anchor in town center. So with that collection of larger users, we now are confident in kind of moving forward with the small to mid-size retail. We're starting our first mixed-use building, which is super exciting.
Oh, tell us about that.
Yeah, so right between Market Basket and InterMed, we're putting up what we're calling the Breakaway, and it's a 5-story mixed-use building. It's kind of a modern version of what you expect in a downtown, with 18,000 square feet of ground floor retail restaurant space. It's right up against the street, urban design like your office here. We have interest from some cafes, restaurant, a Pilates group who wants to locate in the ground floor. And then there's 76 apartment units planned on the upper 4 floors.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So really, in a lot of ways, recreating what's been possible in a lot of Maine downtowns because of buildings that once were occupied by commercial users that now have largely been converted to residential on upper floors, and just keeping the retail restaurant on ground level. That's not something that you had the infrastructure already in Scarborough to do because it was a Route 1 farmland turned gravel pit, turned motels, turned now a real purpose-built downtown without the luxury of that infrastructure. Like this building that we're in was made possible through historic tax credit renovations, which is a different economic development incentive. Yeah. To make advantage of an old building and bring it back to life. But you guys basically had a field. And you needed to create the demand from the user base to justify a coffee shop opening where there's likely now to be a pedestrian walking by because they work at InterMed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're finding that with construction pricing the way it is, with second generation retail space having some availability in Greater Portland, we really need to do a mixed-use building or a mixed-use project to make the numbers work for the retail, and they kind of feed each other. So we can afford to do the mixed-use building because there's residential above, and retail's interested because we can meet them at the right kind of lease rate, and also they have built-in customers, living above. So they're what would seem like a risky location change, coming off of Route 1 and going into a project is less risk adverse because we have the Market Basket, we have InterMed, we have Costco, we have that daily draw of traffic from external customers. And we also are building in a base flow of customers that live upstairs or neighbors that live in the residential phase we built a few years ago that can walk. So we're finding that we're getting some momentum, with the combination of those anchors as well as kind of the built-in customer base we have in the project.
It almost seems too that, and I'm sure this was by design, but having your background and the ability to look at the bigger picture, and now in your role as the director of development, looking at it like saying, hey, it might be attractive to have this box anchor come here, but realistically, we need something more like this to generate a certain amount of foot traffic or whatnot to support these smaller ones coming in later. I feel like that's more forward thinking than the majority of developers are as it relates to really planning for what the place will be like once it's done.
Yeah. And it's a lot of sales. Like we sell on, number one, getting InterMed to come to the Downs. Yeah. And then they get interested in a site that's on the edge. And we say, okay, well, maybe. But what if you could be in town center? So it's a planning background, I think, and also not just myself, but also team members. Yeah. It's getting the interested parties to land in the right, like you're saying, the right location within the project. So get them to the project and then get them in the right location within the project. It took us 3 years to get Market Basket to be comfortable locating inside the downs where we're planning the town center
Really?
versus on the edge.
Interesting. Why did they felt they had more visibility on the edge or something?
Totally. Yeah.
From the highway or
Totally.
yeah.
I mean, Costco kind of needed to be on the edge for traffic reasons to make sure your wife could get in and out easily, as well as the 2 other million folks.
She literally puts Costco runs on the calendar, and I'm sure she's not the only one. So you were successful at getting Costco in there, Market Basket's coming, InterMed's locating in the downtown. I'm curious, though, you have a mixed-use project, but Costco's not building the apartments on top of that location like they are out in California. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of an interesting approach, and I'm curious.
That'll be the second or third Costco in Maine.
Yeah.
They had to do a conventional one first.
But it sounds like you're doing your own mixed-use site there or building there. And are there plans to do others on the site?
Yeah. So within the town center, we're planning around 300 units just in the town center. So that means 300 units that are adjacent to or above shops and restaurants. Mm-hmm. So, we're taking a good bite of that with that 76 unit building I mentioned. See how that goes. That'll be complete in early 27, and then we'll be planning our next few phases of mixed-use buildings.
And aren't you doing a project in Freeport right now, or just got permitted?
Yeah, so I live in Freeport, like I mentioned. I had been going by a few different sites every day, be on the way and home from work, right on the edge of Main Street. And there's a site on Depot Street, which is down by the train tracks, right next to Freeport Village Station, which is where the L Bean outlet is. That actually was approved for a project a handful of years ago. L Bean owns the site. The project never moved forward. Numbers didn't work at the time. And so knowing that it didn't move forward and what a great site it is, we approached Bean and said, hey, do you still want to sell that land to a developer? And they were eager to kind of work with us. They saw what was happening at the Downs and trusted our approach. So over the past year, we've been planning and went through permitting this fall. Had a great experience actually with Freeport, getting the project approved. We're kind of in pre-construction right now and plan to start in April.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So are you using similar process to what you're using at the Downs in terms of construction? And are there any approaches that you've been trying to incorporate into like the way that you guys build? I know that you have obviously the upper hand advantage of having your own in-house construction company as well, but are you looking at methods such as, volumetric modular construction or any other kind of approaches to?
Where we do a panelized building.
Yeah.
And we've done that on a number of apartment buildings, condo buildings in the Downs. So that's an approach that we would use. We've learned a lot over the last 6 or 7 years in terms of unit layouts, what's really desirable for rental apartments. So we kind of a lot of lessons learned in terms of the right square footage, bedroom mix. We're doing a combination of studio 1 and 2 bedroom units that we think really meets the market in Freeport. But we're also doing a building that's unique to Freeport. We're not taking a building that we did at the Downs and just applying it to this site. We wanted to make sure the architecture, the building scale, really fit into Freeport. So it would have been easier just to kind of take a plan off the shelf that we had done, and probably would have been a little less expensive. But we wanted to make sure we were kind of fitting into the community and complementing what's around the site.
Yeah. So when we're talking about like pre-approved designs and so forth, that could be a challenge when we think about design aesthetics and what one community might want instead of another. Like Freeport, as an example, we heard in the past from some people that there was apprehension to having a pitched roof and that they wanted to see a flat roof or vice versa, things of that nature. But you were able to kind of come into Freeport, take a process that you're using, go to the town, get an approval for a building that aesthetically is going to look really good, and will deliver a number of units to a pretty dense site, correct? Like an infill kind of application.
Yeah, we're doing a 51-unit project, 3-story building. It's designed in a way that kind of really replicates what's around it. Actually looks a bit like kind of the mills that used to be down in that section of Freeport, the old shoe mills, etc. But we were really kind of listening to the community too. We weren't trying to square peg, round hole the project. I live in town. I'm on some committees, so I really kind of understood the desire the town had for people living right in downtown.
Because there used to be a couple thousand maybe, or 1,500 people, and now it's only about 300 people living in the downtown.
Yeah, like the outlet boom of Freeport, which was great for Freeport, in the 80s through 90s. A lot of housing was eliminated, for parking. So the shops were really successful. Main Street was successful from a outlet retail standpoint, but it lost its mixed-use neighborhood character. It lost the housing component that a downtown ultimately needs. So we're kind of bringing that back and putting housing back where it was prior to the retail boom. And the town's been studying this for 3 or 4 years now. They've made some good zoning changes to enable this project and others. So we feel like it's perfect timing to kind of execute on town goals and also kind of meet a great need that Freeport has.
I'm glad we get to talk about that because there's a lot of focus, and rightfully so, on what's happening at the Downs and will continue to happen at the Downs. But this is an example, and I know there are other communities that you do work in as well, of how you can take an approach that's really forward-thinking and I think empathetic to what the community needs and apply that approach to deliver a quality project that then hopefully in the future creates less apprehension from the community around more projects because they're like, well, that one really worked well and all the boogeymen that we thought were going to come didn't come. So maybe we can do it again.
Yeah, and then you need to know the community. You need to, in the communities that have their zoning in place, that have their comprehensive plans in place, it's that much more kind of straightforward that you're executing their vision, not necessarily your vision. So that's a key awareness that you need to have. And also, often you need to do a lot of kind of listening. You need to be patient. And we find that the more amenities and the more community benefits you can provide, obviously, I don't want to say obviously, but the more straightforward an approval can be. And usually it's also good for the success of the project. If you're adding some amenities within a development project, it's not only good for the renters or buyers that you need to have that project be successful, but it's also good for the community. So we've found that at the Downs. We've been finding that in Freeport and other projects that we've worked on. That's
great. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and maybe you can share some insight around what's going on with the new ice arena at the Downs, because that's pretty exciting. And I would imagine the community is really excited about having something like this come. Probably would be interesting to see the number of people that might have initially objected to development at the Downs, how many of them show up to the ice arena to
Ice arena and Costco. Those are the most exciting amenities.
Can you tell us more about that and, what's been a driver behind this, development aspect occurring on the site and what you hope to accomplish with it?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is Scarborough has been trying to perform an ice arena, whether it's been a boosters group, the town, or others for 10 or 15 years at this point, maybe longer. I think there's 2 or 3 other proposals over the years to try to provide ice, which is much needed in Southern Maine, particularly south of Portland. They're hard projects to figure out. They aren't projects that necessarily pencil from a private development standpoint. And so we were approached by the Maine Mariners, who have a fairly new owner, the minor league hockey team that plays in Portland. And their new owner wanted to kind of solve some of the challenges the team has had. One is really around housing. So they approached us first about housing, because typically the players stay in hotels or extended stay kind of platforms, which, and not necessarily together, in the same hotel. And we struck a deal with the Mariners to provide housing within the Downs. So all of their players and coaches, we have a long-term relationship on providing housing at the Downs in our apartments.
That's great.
That fostered a relationship. And then in addition to having, reliable quality housing, the Mariners really wanted some more kind of custom, reliable practice space. So we started a conversation around an ice arena to provide both housing on site, but also practice ice on site. And so that snowballed into a concept to have an arena that would provide a place for the Mariners to practice, but also they only practice 2 hours a day. Maybe they do weight training for another 2 hours. So there's all this additional ice time that would be available for hockey, for high school hockey teams, youth programs, tournaments, etc. So it turned into a larger project where could move forward with an ice arena that solves the Mariners' goals, practice on site where they live, and still play at the Civic Center, but also be a facility that can be used by a number of schools, youth programs in Southern Maine.
That's really interesting. And I think the type of approach that's necessary in order for us to continue having success with development in Maine, partnering with employers. In this case, this was, the Mariners. It's a business organization,
Yeah.
They're an employer of their athletes and all the people that support those athletes in their endeavors. Basically saying, look, we'll guarantee you housing for people that are working in a kind of a modern mill. It's like,
sure.
This is like we pay people to perform athletics to generate other economic benefits, and everybody has a good time. It's a business enterprise. And I think that's the reason why there's been so much success at the Downs, is because it's almost like it leads first in a lot of ways, and maybe I'm missing it, but with the focus on the jobs that will be created and the enterprise that will be occurring there, not just housing only. I mean, you've had a lot of success with housing there and probably could have more success if it were only housing. But there's much more integrated approach going on.
It is, and it's also for the residents in the project. I haven't mentioned Allagash yet, but Allagash now has a brewery in the project for their benefit as well, because there's watch parties now happening at the Downs, with the players.
Yeah.
And the residents get to meet the players of the hockey team. The Hearts of Pine players actually don't live at the Downs, but they live on another site that we own. We think they'll move over to the Downs in a year or two. So that same kind of experience is happening with them, where we're having watch parties at Allagash with the Hearts of Pine players and various events that residents in the Downs, residents in Scarborough can kind of meet these players and get to know them. So it feels like a community.
Yeah.
And I think the hockey arena will add another dimension to that.
So it's really identifying the needs in the community and building character through the projects and different organizations being drawn to the site. I really have actually felt this probably for the first time ever as an adult in Maine. This excitement around following a sports team with the Hearts of Pine. Like, wow, they're actually legit, major league level.
Better than anticipated.
Oh, yeah, they did so good,
Yeah.
And I think that having these kinds of places in Southern Maine where people can come together and be a part of a bigger community versus just driving to a game, maybe you do a tailgate or something, then you leave, it's more there's a lot more going on there.
Yeah.
Do you think in time that their pro field would be there?
Pro field would be at the Downs?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Right now, I think Fitzpatrick's serving them well. It's kind of cozy. It's a great location within the city of Portland.
It'd be so much cooler to have a pro field at the Downs.
For us, for sure. So we're certainly open to it and would see great benefit from it. I also know there's a lot of reasons for it to be in Portland.
Sure.
But yeah, it'd be great to have that
I mean,
conversation.
it could still be the Portland Hearts of Pine, right? Just in Scarborough.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little tagline. So I think ultimately you've done so much incredible work with this project. I'm really thankful that you're willing to share this with our audience today, Dan. And I'm curious, for people who are interested in what's going on at the Downs or with what you're doing at M&R, where can they get more information?
We certainly have a website. The Downs has a website.
Sure.
And we actually do tours all the time.
You do?
So if there's individuals that are say, hey, I want to open a business at the Downs, or I want to move to the Downs, or I just want to learn what's happening at the Downs, we give tours, it seems like on a daily basis, whether it be with any of those kind of categories.
Yeah.
So
you have an office on site that
we
people
do.
can go?
Our office is fairly close to Costco. It's in the
Okay.
Innovation District, and that's where my team is at. The property management group is elsewhere in Scarborough.
Sure.
But we're there on a daily basis, and we'd love to give a tour to anybody who's interested. Maybe grab a beer at Allagash after.
Yeah, that's it's really developing as a place where people are going to want to go to live and work because it's a cool place to be. I mean, it already has become that in a lot of ways, but it's continuing. So
For sure. In 26 and early 27 is going to be transformational. It's going to go from, albeit cool residential project, Innovation District, Costco. Like the edges are complete, but the core, the heart and soul of the project isn't yet executed. That's going to change in the next year and a half with InterMed, Market Basket, our first mixed-use building. We're going to be working on a town green that's going to be right in the center, adjacent to the mixed-use buildings. So it's really going to change from an amenity standpoint in the next couple of years and become what we've been talking about, from the beginning.
Well, it's definitely, I leave a conversation like this wishing this were happening in Augusta, and I'm sure many others would be like, wow, that would be great to have in my community as well.
Well, Augusta has the bones. I mean,
We
you're on
do.
Water Street.
Yeah,
We're trying to build a modern Water Street.
I think there's a great infrastructure in our downtowns for sure. I would say in general, we maybe as a community, and we're not alone in this, missed the mark with the development that occurred at places like the Marketplace at Augusta or out by the highway where we now have Target and so forth. Neither one of they're great retail, anchor sites and have other services as well, but neither one of them had any housing component at all. And you've led largely with housing and now are incorporating housing into more mixed developments. And it creates a different kind of ethos as a destination for both people who want to live or work. And that is hard to find and hard to redo, once you already have the infrastructure in place.
I think it's more resilient, too, from a longevity standpoint, from an economic standpoint, because the residential adds a base flow of customers, of activity, vitality that shopping centers really don't have.
Right.
They have convenience, but they don't have sort of that foot traffic.
Yeah.
In the evenings, in the mornings, etc.
I wonder if just curious your thoughts on this. Should there be any focus made to trying to create or use pad sites that are on retail developments around the state to do more housing? I know like in Bangor, they floated this for around the mall as an example because the mall is kind of languishing, but plenty of open parking spaces that can be turned.
I think you're going to see a lot of that as long as zoning enables it.
Okay.
Around the Maine Mall, for example, on John Roberts Road, by Home Depot, there's a lot of apartments that have happened in the last 6 or 8 years. And I think you'll see more of it around the Maine Mall. And as long as there's the housing demand, which we know there's a lack of housing in the state. What is it, 70,000 units?
It's so crazy. I was talking about this with somebody recently, and we've had a vacancy in one of our apartments, which is modestly priced with the heat included. And it's a nice apartment in downtown Waterville. It was vacant for like 3 months for $1,400 a month, 2-bedroom apartment, like almost 800 square feet. So it's like, okay, and the area is not rough. The building has nice curb appeal. It's like it's almost like you need a thermometer to tell you where the demand is at what time and at what price range, because this blanket statement of we need 80,000 is true based on the economic, forecasting that was done in terms of both current demand and to hit our growth potential. Yet it seems like there's bands in which those 80,000 exist. Like maybe 60% is below 80% AMI for an income level. Like you need to create something that they can buy without a housing subsidy voucher.
Right.
Or it's people that the money just doesn't really matter. It's over here. And then there's this segment that's here. They get no subsidy, but they also don't have enough income to afford an $1,800 a month apartment. So it just sits there. This isn't obviously an issue in Scarborough, an $1,800 a month apartment. But
Yeah, I think I can't speak to your particular situation, but the whole attainable home ownership housing unit is a big deal, and obviously in high demand, and that's driven by, in part, for new development. I mean, Maine is hot, right? So not just housing prices are high, land prices are high. So if land prices are high, you have a lot of soft costs, those play a significant role in creating new housing units that are unaffordable.
Yeah.
So the more we can focus on and figure out how to crack the attainable home ownership nut, that's a huge deal.
It really seems a lot to do with density. And then, I mean, this unit that I mentioned to you, it's rented now, but it just seemed, and we were marketing a lot, and I've heard from other landlords, same thing, you're marketing a lot, we're not filling them in different parts of the state. But in Southern Maine, Portland, Scarborough, anywhere really in York or Cumberland County, as soon as a unit's available, it's rented. So it really, I think it's more acute in areas where there is more industry, and jobs. And Maine's kind of got this two tails going of areas that are just hanging on by a thread, and other areas like, around where you're at, in large part because of number of years of focus of getting certain kinds of industry to come there, particularly on the life sciences front.
Right.
That are really driving the demand more so because you have the employment base that supports what it costs to actually build stuff now.
Yeah.
Or it's subsidized, one of the two.
Right.
Are you guys able to pull off market rate for acquisition with people there that are under like 120% of area median income?
We did a few years ago. We had a lot of success building, what is it called? Missing middle housing.
Yeah.
And we had that success because we were at the right price point and we were building with density. We were doing garden style condominiums. We did some tiny homes actually. We did cottage single family homes that were 15 to 1,800 square feet, not 28 to 3,200 square feet. And interest rates were half what they are now.
Yeah.
So construction interest rates, and also obviously
on the purchase
mortgage
side.
rates.
Yeah.
That's, as you know, in your industry, has a big impact on buying power. So we want to get back to that kind of place. We've been
Is there a pathway to that, do you think, if rates are at 6%?
I think so. One of the things that I was thinking about a little bit earlier is the more we can get kind of the additional costs lowered on development projects. Like we understand what the engineers' costs, the architects' costs, construction costs, they were high during the pandemic. They've plateaued to some degree. They kind of are what they are. The more the entitlement costs, impact fees, risk associated with duration of permitting, those costs are the ones that I think the state and local governments have the most ability to influence and lower, which can play a key role. You take 10 or 15% off the cost of executing a subdivision in a house or a unit, you can get back into that missing middle with maybe slightly lower interest rates, not dramatically. Say they're 5.5 or 5. I think you'll see a lot more of that housing sector executable, at least for us.
Yeah, so maybe the state's biggest lever to pull would be creating some kind of revolving loan fund or a bond initiative that would allow lower rates for people that are buying newly created, housing inventory.
That and, like you said, density,
Yeah.
allowing small lots, and allowing compact development, not large lot development.
Yeah.
Because then you can really be efficient
Yeah.
in terms of infrastructure, unit styles,
That's great.
land. Yeah.
Well, this has been a super helpful conversation. Housing's at the forefront of what's going on, both for everyday citizens, people running for government. It seems to be like the forefront of the gubernatorial campaigns are all talking about what's going on with housing. And you all have really done a wonderful job at the Downs and elsewhere at creating great housing opportunities for people, but also jobs as well. And it's something the state needs more of. I wish there were a way to continue just copying what you're doing there in other parts of our state. And I know people listening, I'm sure, will take heed to a lot of the information that you've shared and how they might apply it to their projects or what it is that they're working on. So I appreciate you taking the time, Dan, to join us.
It's my
today.
pleasure, and we're kind of here to help, and we'd love to impart the knowledge that we've learned, the lessons learned.
Yeah.
Some have been easy lessons, others have been hard, but we're happy to deploy things that we learned at the Downs elsewhere. So
Thanks. And the next
certainly
time I
reach
go
out.
to Costco, I'm going to set up a tour
Okay.
of the site.
Come
It'll
see
be
me.
a twofer.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Cheers.